Hey, what's going on? Justin here from Modern Mixing, and thanks for checking out another video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the SlickEQ from Variety of Sound and from Tokyo Dawn Labs. It's a collaboration between them. And it's a mixing and mastering EQ which was designed for ease of use and of course great sound. It's arranged in low, mid, and high semi-parametric layout for a fast and intuitive workflow in mixing. So we got our low, our mids, and our highs. So it also comes with access to 4 distinct EQ modes: American, British, German, and Soviet, and each one of them has a set predefined EQ curve and behavior. So the plugin itself is Windows VST, it's Mac VST, and it's Mac audio units, and unfortunately it doesn't come in AAX, but if you want to load it up into Pro Tools, you can get a plugin like this, the Blue Cat Patchwork, which is very inexpensive, and you can host your plugins in here as well as do a whole bunch of other things. So let's get into the features. Hopefully I can help you understand the workflow of this plugin and how you can use it a little bit more efficiently. So the first thing is the high pass filter here, and when it's off it's grayed out. It starts from 10 Hertz all the way up to 350 Hertz depending on where you want your cutoff to be. Then on the low frequency section here, you have 2 options. You have shelf and you have bell. And this frequency knob determines the center frequency of where you want to apply your boost. And it goes from 30 Hertz all the way up to 1000. Then you have your gain knob, which goes from -18 all the way up to +18. And this cool little feature here is you can bypass it. So when you turn it off, it'll be grayed out. And when you turn it on, obviously it's in color. So from there, we have the mid frequency here, and this is a bell. Again, this is set. You can't change this. And the center frequency starts from 100 Hertz and goes all the way up to 10 kilohertz. Again, we got our bypass button there. And then the gain, again, for the taking out, cutting, or boosting, it goes from -18 all the way up to +18 dBs. And the high frequency section here, similar to the low end, you got your shelf and you got your bell. You can choose between one of the two. The center frequency, it goes from 500 to a whopping 40 kilohertz. I know it's crazy, but you never know. You might have to boost up there. And you got your on-off setting there. And of course, the gain, as always, it goes from -18 up to +18. And from there, we got our EQ models. So we got American, British, and German. And as you switch between each one, the background color is going to change. Just makes it a little bit easier to navigate them. So each model represents a specific set of curves and EQ behaviors, providing their own musical feel. So if you don't know what the EQ curves are doing and you're listening, well, I suggest you listen anyway so you know what you like and what you don't like. But if you want to get a graphical representation of what those curves are doing, I suggest downloading the Tokyo Dawn documentation from their website. And it'll graphically show you here, for instance, the American one. It shows you what's going on when you apply a peak filter or when you apply a bell-shaped filter, boost, or cut. Same thing with the shelf. And also the British. And you can see this one's a little bit more unique with the boost is wider than the cut. The cut's a lot more narrow. So, you can use these graphs to sort of help you understand what each one's doing so you can apply it for your sort of needs. And then this will go through the rest of them as well. But I'll let you go through that. Now, I know a lot of people are kind of trying to guess, well, American, British, German, which sort of analog piece of gear is that tied to? And Tokyo Dawn is pretty, explicit about the fact that they don't actually model any piece of gear. There's actually no deeper meaning beyond the color and the name itself. They're just meant for memorization and identification of each model. So just in case anybody's wondering, these actually don't model any analog hardware. And after the EQ curves, we got this EQ saturation here. And basically what that does is when it's off, there's no saturation. And when it's on, you're applying saturation to your boosts. So if I'm boosting, I'm applying some saturation. So I'm boosting 2.6 dBs. I'm applying saturation as well as the curve. But if it's at 0 dBs or I'm cutting, it's not applying saturation. And moving on from there, we're going to the output stage over here, and this controls the type of saturation in the output stage itself. So we got 4 options: linear, which is basically nothing, it's clean setting. Then you got silky, and this is a type of saturation with an open character, and it generates low and even odd harmonics. Then you got mellow. This is a subtle warming. It generates a very low level of odd harmonics. Then you got deep. Now see if you can understand this sentence. dynamic odd order distortion with a distinct frequency dependent touch for increased depth and dimension. So if you understood that, that's what that does. What I hear it sort of like the name says it. It says deep, and I hear it adds this sort of darker sort of color to the sound, which I like in some cases, I guess. After that, you got your calibrate, and this goes from 0 dBs down there all the way up to 18. And what this does is this controls the amount of saturation coming out of this output stage here from whatever you have selected. So the more decibels you have increased on the calibrate, the more it's going to enhance this output stage here, depending on whatever you select. And next we have the output gain here, and this is pretty self-explanatory. It just controls the level of audio going out of the plugin, but it also has an LED feature here that on the right, it'll light up red if you're going beyond that 0 dBFS limit. So that'll just let you know, hey, you're clipping the plugin, time to turn it down or adjust your settings. And after that, we have this auto button here, and what this does is it activates the auto gain mode. So essentially it's an auto compensation for the output volume. And while the button is engaged, the EQ will try and preserve the subjective loudness while operating the EQ. So that just means that the more you boost, you're not only going to be applying gain to that frequency, but you're also going to be increasing the output level of the plugin. So what this does is it tries to compensate for that output level. So as you're boosting this EQ, it's going to sort of do some level matching so that you can hear the EQ boost for what it is instead of the entire volume being boosted at the output stage. I generally have this turned off. I'm just used to a workflow of the regular style EQ when I'm boosting. When I boost, I generally want to add that sort of extra volume to the sound, so I don't really like to have this on. But a lot of people have been mentioning that it's a really good feature and they're happy it's there. They really get a lot of use out of it. So who knows, maybe you can get a lot of use out of that as well. Lastly, we got the stereo function here. And this basically just allows us to process the sound in a few different ways, in mono, stereo, and then some in diff, which is basically just mid-side processing. So that's it for the features, and hopefully you kind of understand the signal flow there, but let's get into some samples. Okay, so let's get into some demos. So first, before we get into it, just to sort of give you a heads up, I don't really push this plugin too hard. So as far as like the before and afters, it's not going to be something where, it's night and day where the difference is going to be incredibly noticeable. I use this as for subtle amounts of color here and there just to sort of brighten things out, get things to stand out a little bit. And that's sort of how I tend to be using the plugin now. But if I was going for an effect or something that's sort of different or outside the box or something really creative, then you can definitely push this plugin. But the first thing I have here is a set of drums, so I'm going to solo that, and I'm using the German EQ curve here. I got the saturation on, and with this I was just really trying to get the drums to pop just a little bit because the mix is pretty dense and they sort of got lost a little bit in the rest of the record. So wanted to pop them out a bit, and I set a high shelf here, and I set it to 2.3 kilohertz, and I'm boosting up about 2 dBs. I have the output stage set to silky just to give me a little bit of saturation going out, and then I also bumped up the bottom end a little bit, 0.7 dBs at 70 hertz. So let's see what that sounds like in solo, and then I'll bring in the rest of the instruments and you'll see how it pops out of the mix. So let's bypass the plugin first. Very nice color, very, very nice. Okay, so now let's bring in the rest of the instruments. So I'll unsolo this here and let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so let's turn that back on. Let's go to the acoustic guitars now. We'll solo these. And this time I use the British EQ curves here, and the output stage I set to mellow. It's really hard to explain exactly what all of these curves do, but sometimes there's a certain sound you sort of just play around with it. You select between the different curves that you want, and then you find something that you feel works for the record. So that's kind of what I did for this one. There's no secret like, well, this had the best high-end curve for acoustic guitars. It's nothing like that. It's really just a feel type of thing. So with the high end, I did boost quite a bit, actually, 4 dBs at 4.5 hertz. And again, with the shelf output stage set to mellow and calibrate, I pushed a little bit, 7.9 dBs. And I also cut out a little bit here in the mid-range, 313 hertz, negative 0.7 dBs. And then also the high-pass filter set to 40 hertz, just to get a lot of that low-end stuff out of there. But let's see what this sounds like, and I'll do it in solo first, and then we'll bring everything in. Okay, so let's get some context now and put the rest of the mix in here. So yeah, it just helps them pull through a little bit. I mean, these guitars, they weren't necessarily a staple for the hook, but they do sort of give a little bit of rhythm. And instead of just sort of feeling them, I kind of wanted them to poke out a little bit, so that plugin worked really well. And it sounds like really nice, you know, that the plugin, you can push it quite a bit, and you know, it doesn't really crap out on you very easily, which is nice. And for the master bus here, I am using the German EQ, the EQ curve again. And there's something about this curve, for whatever reason, that I like the best, especially when it comes to boosting in the high end. There's something about it from, you know, anywhere from say my average range is say 2 kilohertz all the way up to 12 is normally the area that I'll push. And I can push and push and push, and you can really push it hard before it starts to sound bad. So that's what I like. It doesn't crap out on me. So this is why I tend to use this one the most, and combined with the silky output stage, I'd say that's probably the combo that I use the most. In this case, I use the auto gain makeup for whatever reason. I just like how it sounded with this one. Boosting the high end 7 kilohertz, 1 dB, taking out a little bit of mid range just to open up the mix a bit, negative 0.4 dBs at 400 hertz, and then boosting a little bit of low just to give it a little bump in the bottom end. And that's about it. So let's see what it sounds like before and after. So that's it. I mean, again, like I said, it's a lot of subtle moves. That's all you really need with this plugin. It sounds very, very good. It helps bring things to life. Something about the saturation in here, it's very hard to explain, but it's not doing a ton. I mean, you can push it pretty hard, but it doesn't really do a lot, but it seems to bring things to life a little bit. It gives them, you know, that little extra bit of character to make it that much more musical. So yeah, so that's it. So let's move on to the next section here. Okay, so my general thoughts and my opinion on this plugin. I really like the layout. I think it's simple. I think it's easy. It's easy to understand. Maybe when you first initially get it, you may not really understand what everything does, but once you really get past this section up here and this section over here, everything else is pretty self-explanatory, because if you've seen an EQ before, then you're going to know how to use this. I like that the knobs are big. I like that there's very few options to select from the EQ. It makes things simpler, and it makes things a little bit more musical, in my opinion. And I like that there's no graphical EQ here, because I feel like that just kills the vibe for me. The workflow is very simple. I kind of touched on that, and that's another thing that I really like. The variety, there's different choices, so it's not really just one EQ. There's, you got 4 different EQ curves, plus you have the saturation here, plus you have all of these different output saturations here, and you have the ability to calibrate or to basically increase the amount of harmonic saturation going out of the plugin. So you really have the ability to create many different sounds with this one plugin. I really, really like that. That may be a potential downside for somebody that's, not really good with navigating through choice, or they just think that too many options are not a good thing. This may not be the plugin for them, but again, it's free. Eventually what's going to happen is you're going to land on the things that you like. And I've already started to see myself doing those sort of things. So when you sort of grab this plugin, you're going to reach for things that you're familiar with or the things that you like the most. And then lastly, the thing I really like about this plugin is the color and tone. I think it's very unique from any other plugin that's out there. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than other plugins. It's just different, because there is still some EQs that I use quite frequently that I really, really like the color of those, and I'm used to them, and they work really well for my workflow. But this is just another color, and I think that this EQ alone, I think that I could probably replace some of the EQs that I use on my mix bus, and I think that this would actually sound really good. So yeah, so that's it for my review. Like I said, go pick it up. The links are below. You'll have everything you need there to download this plugin, to experiment with it, try it, all that sort of stuff. So that's it. Until the next video, take care.
Make yourself just trust in me. See the best in me. If you haven't read the book, you've only seen the movie. More than my cover first, try to get to know